Houdini is a beast of a software and my personal favorite tool for 3D. Today we're going to talk about why, while busting my top 5 myths about this incredible program. Let's dive in. Hi there, my name's Christopher Rutledge, and I'm a CG director and a VFX artist. I've used many different softwares over the years, including Maya, Cinema 4D, a bit of Blender, and my personal favorite, Houdini. Everyone who knows me knows that I'm a massive fan of this incredibly powerful software. And if you've ever looked into learning this program yourself, it's possible you may have some thoughts or fears about getting into it. Let's start off by myth busting our top 5 misconceptions about Houdini. Myth number 1, Houdini is only meant for simulations and VFX. This is a big misconception, and while Houdini is of course very well known for its amazing simulation tools, being used by almost every big studio out there for high-end VFX, it's actually just another 3D program, or DCC, just like Cinema 4D, Maya, Blender, and others. You can do just about anything you can think of with Houdini. In fact, I love using Houdini for character work, like rigging and animation. It even has stuff like a built-in node-based compositing tool set, which can be really helpful from time to time. You of course can use Houdini as your bespoke effects tool in your pipeline, using it with other softwares you're more comfortable with, bringing simulations back to C4D, for example, instead of using something like Xparticles. And I think this is actually how most Houdini artists like myself start out with the program. And then many of us end up just getting hooked and wanting to use it for everything after a while. Myth number 2, Houdini is the hardest 3D program to learn. It always frustrates me when people say this because I personally could not disagree with this point more. I think one of the reasons for this misconception is because of myth number 1. Most people who dip their toe into Houdini try using it to do something right off the bat that's very difficult, like a big ocean simulation, for example, rather than learning the fundamentals like they would in other programs. As I said before, I've learned a lot of the other 3D programs, and I think if anything, Houdini is one of the easiest to learn because the logic is so consistent throughout, and the way the things work makes so much sense at a fundamental level. Plus, unlike a lot of other softwares, there aren't a million shortcuts to learn. Most of the process is just pressing tab, typing to look for the node that you need, and then playing with those parameters. Additionally, because of the procedural nature of Houdini, when you learn it, you can learn so much from looking at other people's files and following the flow of nodes to understand the logic of how they build something, as opposed to other softwares where you're working more destructively and you're baking things down, and you can no longer follow the steps in the process of baking your beautiful Houdini pie or donut. Before we move on, if you're finding this video interesting, make sure you subscribe to School of Motion and hit the like button. It really helps get the word out there about this stuff. Myth number 3, you need to learn coding or math to learn Houdini. Don't worry, you don't need a math PhD, and you don't need to know how to implement academic research papers from scratch into your setups. Certainly some people like to do that, but not every Houdini user is a high-level technical programmer, just like not every Cinema 4D or every Blender user knows how to write plugins in Python from scratch. We all know coding can be really intimidating. And when I first started getting into Houdini, I was afraid of code. But as I got more used to it, Houdini and its expression language Vex ended up being the gateway for me to start learning how to code. You may have watched some Houdini tutorials where you've seen people do all kinds of crazy stuff with dot products and matrices and quaternions. But while it certainly doesn't hurt to know some shader code or be good at math, it definitely is not as necessary or scary as it may seem at first glance. First of all, Vex, which is the main expression language in Houdini, is something that I was able to get by without learning at all for my first year and a half or so into Houdini. It was definitely worth learning and was much more approachable than any other kind of programming language that I've learned before. But even for really stubborn people, you can do everything that you would with code using Vex instead with nodes using VOPs if you want. I know some high-end effects artists at places like Disney Animation who just prefer to use VOPs. Some people are just more comfortable with nodes, and whatever works for you is great. Over time, SideFX is adding more and more tools that make getting by without being a code monkey even easier. Math-wise, linear algebra is definitely something that helps with understanding 3D graphics at a more fundamental level. Vectors, floats, matrices, etc. This is all stuff that you may already be somewhat familiar with in whatever programs that you're using. That said, the stuff is definitely fairly easy, and you're probably already using way more of it than you realize in your 3D work. For example, vectors usually just means three-dimensional values. Think like XYZ coordinates in 3D space, or RGB values for color. And the tools that you use like bend deformers, easing, layer blending, and more are already using basic vector math under the hood just to do these kinds of operations. You can dive deeper and learn this stuff in Houdini if you choose, or you can get by fine as a 3D artist without them. The rabbit hole will go as deep as you like. Myth number 4, working in Houdini is a lot slower and it takes a lot longer to build the setups that you want. Houdini, being an almost fully procedural software, makes the workflow a bit different from the rest of the 3D apps. Rather than building something once like you would in other softwares, usually in Houdini, you're creating a series of steps and essentially building a tool to model, generate, simulate, or animate whatever you want. This definitely makes it less ideal for certain types of workflows where you just need to model a specific object or character once, but it can also be a huge time saver and is the best possible workflow when you need to generate a lot of different models. Rather than modeling a donut once, you build a donut generator that can make donuts in any shape, decided by the geometry that you input at the first step. It's also ideal for making client changes. You put in the upfront work to building your tool, and then when you have notes like, make them cupcakes instead of donuts, you just tweak your setup slightly and create the variation that they want, rather than having to start from scratch and rebuild the entire foundation. In this way, it can be a huge time saver, and it's a big part of the reason Houdini is incredibly popular in game studios for things like generating procedural levels or assets. Learning the software itself will only get you so far. There's a ton of useful classes and resources on schoolofmotion.com to help up your design and animation skills, something invaluable whether you're working in Houdini or any other software. You can find a list of all their current offerings on their courses page. Myth number 5, Houdini is expensive software. Believe it or not, Houdini is actually completely free. Well, at least it's completely free to learn it. They have a free apprentice version, which is ideal for learning and has very few limitations. It just can't be used commercially at all. But that's okay, because once you learn it and gain the confidence that you actually want to use it for your projects, you can buy a Houdini Indie license for less than $300 a year. What a deal. The expensive licenses are essentially only for big studios and high-end freelancers. But SideFX was very smart in making it as accessible as possible to learn the software, setting a trend for the rest of the industry, where we now have much cheaper Maya and Nuke indie versions, for example. Not only this, but as of recently, Houdini actually comes with a fantastic free built-in render engine called Karma, which I'm now using for all my projects, and I love it. It also doesn't require any plugins either. It can do almost every kind of simulation and has all the tools built in that you could possibly need. And if you want something really custom, you can always build it yourself on top of the amazing groundwork that SideFX has laid. And you can find lots of awesome plugins, tools, or HDAs built by the community all over the internet. So go download your free copy of Houdini Apprentice right now and dive in. So what do you think? Are you excited? Are you afraid? What have you heard? Leave a comment below and a like if you want to see more Houdini content from School of Motion. I hope this was useful, informative, and inspiring to anyone watching who's been considering learning this amazing program. Thanks for watching, and make sure to subscribe and hit the bell for more design and animation tips. Head to schoolofmotion.com to learn more about the interactive online curriculum, and let our team know if you have any questions. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.